for me, coming from the gaming world.
Sounds like we're live.
Hey guys, we're live here with Tech Talk today. So if you've been following along for the past month or so, we've been talking a lot about video and video lighting. Previously, we're taking a look at how to bring live events into stages and what changes have to happen to a show to make it look good on camera. Today, we're going to take a huge leap forward and talk about virtual studios. I'm here with Brad Haynes also from Chevet. And today we've got Tim from Events United, along with Brian, Matt, and Tanner from Boom Creative. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do and your company?
Yeah, so we're based in the event industry. We've been producing events for 12 years. And when we got into video wall a couple of years ago with Chevet, we've been taking this year during COVID to kind of rethink how we do all of our events. In the middle of that, it's also kind of brought us into the film industry by using virtual production. So you're going to see behind me during this webinar our video wall in action and people using it. And you're going to kind of see the camera moving and what that does to the screen behind it. So this is all new for us this year. And so we've been trying to push forward as fast as we can to really just sustain business right now.
All right, cool. And then Team Bomb Creative, tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, so just two corrections. I'm sorry to do this live.
It's Boom.
It's Boom, and it's Ben.
Oh, sorry. Oh, man, I am so sorry.
No, you're
I'm
good.
Ben, but I'm ready to go with Brian. So whatever.
We're all good over here. So, a very similar sentiment to what Tim just mentioned. We started in... Does anybody have us live somewhere? I'm hearing us loop back.
I don't know where that's coming from.
Interesting. All right, so I'll just soldier on. So Boom Creative, same sentiment as Tim. We started off as an events company, and we got a little deeper into media servers and specifically to Skies in the last couple years. And this sort of pandemic period was us pushing very fast into the virtual world, which also led us into the film and TV world a lot, working with LED and camera tracking. We're here on a volume at Gum Studios in New York City that we have going in partnership with Four Wall and Gum. And we're doing some demos today, so we figured we'd come live from the stage.
Sweet. So, Tim, for you, I know you're coming from the live events world more than anything else. So can you tell us a little bit about the transition and how it's been for you making that move from doing live events into doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'll try to say it kind of quickly because it's a bit of a story. But back in February, when every show was canceling, we do about 300 plus shows a year, and it was like 10 shows a day were canceling, and so we were trying to figure out what we would do. We had built a facility called Studio Lab, which is where I am right now, and it was supposed to be just rented for people to come in and shoot commercials or film. So it's just a black curtain in here. There's nothing really else in the space, but we had our video wall from the shows. So at the same time, one of the things that we were supposed to do was join with our friends from Ultrasound and do a tour for Dropkick Murphys, which is right before St. Patrick's Day. They canceled it right before and said, we don't know what to do. And we didn't know what to do because we were running out of work. So we decided we would build kind of a virtual, we called it a virtual event stage at the time in this room, which just had some LED wall. And then we ended up producing that show. And immediately after that, we didn't have a lot of work, and The Mandalorian had started to kind of release some information about what they were doing. Maybe that was a little bit later, but we decided we would try to kind of make our own volume because the LED wall was already set up. We didn't have a lot of work. And so at that time, my nephew Ian, he's behind me right now, making this all work, tried a very rough version of what you see now, and it was a disaster. I mean, we were trying to make all this technology work. You have to understand everything's based on perspective of a camera. So basically, we take a video wall, and we're going to make it into picture it as like a 3D window into a different space, essentially. And it didn't go well. Everything was warped and messed up. And then that was when our wall was straight. Right now it's curved, but before it was straight. We still couldn't figure it out. Anyway, so we 7 months later now, it's really dialed in, but it takes a ton of time. But now we've opened our doors to a brand new industry in the film industry, as well as the virtual event industry, which we don't think at this point is ever going to go away entirely. We think some of it will, I think probably about 20% of the events we do now will stay virtual.
Right. And then Team Boom, tell us a little bit about where you guys kind of came from before this and how you've morphed into more of the virtual stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to take it, Ben?
Sure. So we were doing events as well, and we were loading an event, and we got the call to shut down, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do, and we had just been accepted into the Disguise XR program, and we decided to double down on that for when everybody hit Zoom fatigue. So we started working on that, and about 4 months ago, we built our first XR stage. We're on to XR stage version 2 now. We also have this volume here that we came into. It was fortunately already built for us, and we just had to come in and make it work. But yeah, before this, we were doing, concerts, product releases, waiting for fashion season to kick in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I mean, touching back a little bit about, what Tim was saying earlier about how sophisticated it is, I think it's like the ultimate, level of convergence with a lot of things, like, because there's guys that did live events that was just more lighting, and, video was kind of a crossover quite a while ago, but now all of that coming together. Can we spend just a little bit, because I'm a nerd and just like talking about it, but talk a little bit about what all of this is. I mean, we know we have video walls, and we know it's not just a green screen, but, you have things like the Unreal Engine that come into play. And, then you have to figure out the lighting for that. I mean, I got to believe for some of you too, that's a really cool new group to come together with.
Yeah.
I guess whoever wants to take that one.
I mean, I'll start really quick. Yeah, because we talked about this yesterday in sort of our pre-conversation. It really is the hardest workflow that we've had to, be a part of. And the main reason is because it does involve so many disciplines. To Tim's point, this is all about what's happening on camera to its perspective. So you really have to understand lighting for a camera. You have to understand cameras in general. There is a real need for everything to be absolutely in sync. So we're using things like Genlock, and we're Genlocking LED processors, and we're Genlocking media servers and tracking systems. And from the lighting perspective, you've got to know what is going to look good on camera, and LED refresh and all that stuff. And that's just so that you can turn everything on. And then you're moving into Unreal, which is amazing at what it does, and creating these levels, these worlds, but then being able to practically put them on a screen and look good on screen and move perfectly with the camera. It's a lot of, it's tedious, I guess is the point. You have to have patience. You will spend a week or two to make one simple move work correctly. And then you add that to your toolkit. You get to a point where you can run an entire shoot, but we are definitely at the bleeding edge, and not in an exciting way. Sometimes it's very scary.
And because we're on, in these beta programs to figure all this stuff out, what you spent a week learning to do in master the last time might not work the next time the build comes out. And then you have to, put a call out and be like, hey, remember that? Can we have that back again, please? That was important.
And jumping in from the Unreal side of things, one of the really interesting parts about this, I think you mentioned, was people who had different disciplines beforehand and getting into like the real-time rendering world. That's a really interesting thing for me, because I come from like a lighting background, but I also did animation. Like we're a creative company, so we did a lot of content stuff, Notch, other node-based systems. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. All of that kind of comes together in Unreal. So I'm using skills and things that I was doing 4 years ago in a new program and realizing how it like creative sequencing and animation and keyframing, it all kind of comes together in that.
But also
program.
your lighting, like it's physics based. So you have to understand lighting to be able to light in Unreal. It's not, there's no tricks, you're actually, there are fixtures and they have beams and they have, the
There's fog, there's haze.
Yeah. It's you really have to understand the concepts of lighting in theory to, because lighting is what makes these things look real in the first place when you're building, even in completely virtually in Unreal.
Awesome. I think it's fascinating. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, it's the learning curve is huge, but I guess maybe the reason that we're spending so much time and money doing this is because the creative process becomes relatively endless. I mean, we're working on right now a short film that will put my son on the moon, and it's so real. Like you can't, because what happens is, for instance, he has this space helmet that he's going to be wearing, and you're going to see the reflection of the sun off of his helmet. You look through it. You can't do that with green screen, not easily. There's parts where he's kind of interacting with the sun at one point, and in that sun, the video wall becomes the lighting source. It will light him, and so I think why we're spending so much time in this is because that creative process is so just
So many tools. There's no endless.
It's endless. Yeah, exactly.
I feel like there's no Unreal project that I feel like has been 100% completed because there's so much more that you could do to it. There's just so many tools, so many creative processes that you can add to things.
Which has got to be cool, because not that things have gotten boring necessarily, but now with that new, community of people coming together, you see one thing happen, you try to, I can do that, and we can take the next level. And we've started to see some of that with various projects, which I think is really fascinating. But it's so interesting to hear you talk about, the lighting aspect of it too, because obviously being a lighting company, that's very intriguing. Where I think sometimes, even in past projects with green screens and things like that, you don't really take into account now all of the intricacies that you guys are talking about with tracking and in reflections and things like that. One more question, just based on the lighting aspect, is I forgot who we were having a conversation yesterday, but you were talking about, once you set the stuff, it's got to be kind of perfect too, because once that you chip that camera, you can't change a lot of stuff. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? And just, those intricacies in terms of setting that up?
That was you guys. You guys want to go after that one?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't even have to be like in theory. Like we just got done with a shoot just before Thanksgiving, and no harm, no foul. Like everybody's got to learn about this, but we had a pretty big DP show up, and he was wonderful to work with, and he knew that he was stepping into a new world, but I would say we burned about 6 to 7 hours at the top of the first day on a 2-day shoot for him to realize all the things we had, which is to say that your palette becomes limited. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you're using live LED to create like a world, right? And you don't want to break that illusion. The minute that you start lighting the physical LED floor, ceiling, walls, any piece of that virtual set, and you sort of reveal that it's not an environment, that what you're seeing at perspective is simply just a reprojection, it kind of breaks that reality. But to your point from the beginning, yeah, you have to, like, you're building a world of color temperatures and your iris and all that stuff ahead of time when you're dealing in XR. And I guess we should point out there are a couple ways to take advantage of this technology. I think between Tim and ourselves, we're both sitting in what people would call a volume. So you're generally only shooting where LED is fully in the perspective of the camera. And that's done a lot more for TV and film. You're capturing on camera. You have a little more leeway. You can pull focus on your lens. You can zoom. You can zoom in both, but like you can work a little bit more like you're used to working on set. When you're dealing in true XR, you're also rendering like virtual worlds outside of the LED. And when you're doing that, you're much more limited. You cannot touch your iris. Once everything's colored, once your lights are set, once your talent is lit, I mean, you can touch things. You can, we have movers where we'll try to get like shadows and do a couple things, but it becomes a little bit more limited in terms of its tool set.
So, so Tim, just curiosity, like when you're going from like the live lighting where it's, basically we're talking about mechanicalist and, 3-point lighting and that kind of stuff, and that's more traditional. When you're going into an XR situation or a situation like you're in now, how does that change? How you approached lighting a year ago? How different is that to how you're approaching lighting today on the set that you're on?
There's actually a couple of different kind of lighting scenarios that change really based on what you're doing. So for an event, you may be, if there's no cameras, you're lighting just for the event in person, which is a completely different experience than you would light for if there's cameras or IMAG, right? So you have to deal with that part. Once you move to this XR environment, it's very different because the LED wall is also lighting the subject. So as you're standing near it, that you're getting light poured on you, right? So it's not just a black backdrop, and it's interacting with you. So like if they walk by those staircases or the window, the light will shift on them as you'd expect it would if you were in that world. But because we don't have a 360 volume or we don't have a ceiling in here, we have to rely on lighting fixtures to make that difference up, to make the scene look real. So just like Boom has, we have our whole grid is full of moving lights that we can move and position based on what we need. But the problem is soft versus hard light. So an LED wall can really only produce soft light. But if you have something like the sun or a direct light source, you would expect that light to be a bit harsher. And so to do that, we need to actually use real lights to make that happen. Which becomes a problem if we need the hard light to come from behind them and the video wall is behind them. So some of the ways that we have to deal with some of these things is the grid above us actually helps us in a lot of ways, and not having a ceiling necessarily. So the ceilings are really helpful for reflections. They're going to help light your scene, and you can see in Boom Stage that they have one now. I wish we could do it in here, but our roof can't take the weight, so we can't add to it right now. So if you have something reflective like armor or a car or anything, you do get that full wraparound effect as if you're outside. It's really the only way to sell a car look, and something that's really reflective. But on the other hand, with using disguise, which Boom has mentioned before, disguise is a big player in this XR world. Their engines, their hardware is, I don't think that anything can really compete with it, what it can do. But they have these new RX servers, not XR. It made everyone's life hard, but essentially they're going to process information in Unreal. They're going to dump information into their media servers, which we use the VX2s. But inside of that, it allows you to do what we call a set extension. So even though you see a lighting grid above me, and you can kind of see it a little bit, and our video wall is only 160 degrees, not 360. When the camera goes past the edge of the video wall, the set extension kicks in. So imagine you're outside. If the camera goes to the side, you don't want the world to end, right? You're going to run out of real estate. And so it allows us to continue the scene infinitely. That means we can also pan up and look into the sky, and you don't see our lights, but we can mimic the sun from our hard light. So there's benefits of doing that. I won't get into too many details, but I do this is about tech, but it requires us LiDAR scanning our entire studio. It has to be to a fraction of a millimeter of accuracy to make all that work.
Wow. That's super impressive. So I did have a follow-up question I was just thinking about as well. So transitioning from a green screen set to this video set, I know that none of you guys are actors, but have you noticed that when working with talent, do you think that there's a difference with the talent where they can interact with things they can actually see, as opposed to following the bouncing tennis ball?
It definitely does. And especially like when you do the corporate events, you are able to put the person that they are talking to on the wall inside a frame, so they can actually talk to the person there. Imagine the Weather Channel, they could actually see the weather on the wall instead of having to look at work on a green screen and look at a TV and hope that they're hitting the right area. This has been really great for allowing people to interact with what they're seeing, as well as the directors, the producers on site. They actually can see what the final scene will look like. They don't have to, get the capture and then wait 6 months to see what the VFX are and all that sort of stuff. It can be done live and be ready to go. And
Another
that's
thing
really
from the
powerful.
talent perspective, we've done a couple of shows where the concept is like a platform flying around through multiple levels, and maybe it's a CEO or like a talent standing on the platform. On a green screen, we'd have to say, here are your marks. We're going to have to cut those out and edit, and you can't leave this space. Whereas if there's an LED floor, they can see the platform. They can see where they need to move. They can see if they accidentally step off of the platform. So conceptually, it opens up a lot of doors.
Adding on to that specific shoot, the actor, they were able to know when to take the right cues. They were able to interact as they shifted levels, as we brought them into new worlds. They could do the wonder, and they didn't have to be like, is it now? Does it happen now? There's no waiting for the cues. It's just, you just look around and you can interact as if you're really there, and it can be very powerful.
Really awesome. And I was thinking, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it can speed things up because you don't have to explain everything 30 times to get the timing right.
Yeah, I was just thinking is like, now that you all have done this, and obviously it's, continuing to grow. And as you mentioned before, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Do you see this evolving into even some live event type of spaces in some form or fashion?
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, do I think it's the future of the live event industry? No, but I think it's going to be included in, some. It's not a cheap thing to do, which is why I'm hesitant. And it's one thing for us to have a video wall and this entire setup in our own building. It's significantly more affordable for someone to come here rather than for us to bring this somewhere, right? Yeah. So not only that, the tracking system has to be calibrated every time you move it at all. Like if you bump it, you got to recalibrate. So in a live setting, it becomes a bit challenging. Let's say we go to an arena, which this show behind me was in an arena last year. Where will we put the trackers where they can't move? So for instance, the tracking system we're using is OptiTrack, which is what BlackTrax uses. BlackTrax, for those of you that don't know, will allow us to track talent with lights essentially on a stage. So our moving lights will follow them. That doesn't need to be as accurate as the camera frusum does, which is what you see moving behind me on the video wall. That has to be extremely accurate. And in going to a live environment, into a different venue, you would need enough time to make sure that nothing can move. Is it going to happen? Yeah, I know this event's going to happen in an arena and probably in the same fashion, but I'm just saying there'll be some, but it will be limited. That's from my perspective. I'm not in New York. I'm in New Hampshire. I'm a small company. So maybe you guys see it differently.
Yeah, no, I think that you're absolutely right. It's not going to be the future of live events, but it definitely has a real place. The one thing we're not talking about with this underlying technology is just the idea of 3D spatial placement, whether it's on LED, whether it's being live rendered through a key on a green screen, or whether it's just AR elements just live on camera, which honestly takes the most precision to really anchor to the real world. What I love about the future, what this technology is bringing, and this is from a very video heavy perspective. We used to do things like projection map buildings, and we did that by creating things that looked up, that would approximate what that building architecture looks like. And then we would use a grid to warp it on.
Mm.
And what we're finding now is, although you do have to take LiDAR scans of rooms, and although you do have to really consider how you're building these 3D worlds, it's working in real space. When we calibrate this real room to Disguise's 3D visualizer all the way to Unreal's 3D visualizer, we now can speak in meters. We can speak, hey, can I have that 2 feet away from me or 2 meters away? Instead of like, how do we trick people into seeing it that way? And what that means is we can also use this for previs in a very powerful way. And as we start to add these AR and small 3D elements into our live production, I think it's going to become a very powerful tool, especially in an experiential way, to create moments on stage and moments for brands, especially to really have those pivotal moments, either to be recorded and broadcast later, to be live streamed, or to be shown to a limited audience. So I do think it's going to have a powerful place, but it will be a premium thing.
And to grow on that, you know, imagine like on this set here, a recreational company doing a commercial. They do the commercial, it releases, and then they can release this for people to put on their VR headsets as well to go explore the place where the commercial was shot. There's random marketing things beyond just the initial event or the initial film shoot that really can be explored, and you know, it opens up all sorts of things that I don't even know yet.
I think the experiential side of it is a huge market from a content perspective, because we're able to share real-time content to think about installations or just storefront video walls. And I know, Tim, like you mentioned, it's not a cheap thing, but neither was projection mapping when it first started. So I think that there's going to be a huge use of, like, whether it's Unreal itself or Disguise's render stream technology, being able to feed real-time content and make those changes to it, and maybe use things like RealSense cameras to do motion tracking of people walking by.
Or facial tracking even.
I think the concept of virtual production from a content perspective is going to bring a whole lot to the table.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
And this has opened just some other ideas for us too along the way. So you guys mentioned briefly AR, but you know, by going down this road and going back to live, we can now, and actually we're doing another room right now, you can take AR objects and people can interact with them. So with video wall, the video wall is behind you. So let's say in your perspective, there's a light that's hanging next to you, but it's actually on the video wall. So on the video wall, if you were to look at it, it's massive because it's appearing to be right next to you. But if I walk in front of that and you originally thought it was in front of me, your whole perspective changes. So the way you're appearing is that my hand is this size, but if it was actually projected on the video wall right now, my hand would be massive, right? To be in the same scale. But if I walked in front of it, then it wouldn't appear correct anymore. So with AR, it allows us to put objects in front of people and they can interact with them and they can walk behind them. So there's a full 3D environment that can happen. And not only that, you can interact with these 3D elements. So we have trackers in the other room that'll go, and he just built it on your hand, and your hand is tracked in space. So you can manipulate any sort of object that's software, but everyone else will think it's real. So it allows you to do some pretty cool things. And that can happen live in an event.
that's awesome. It's, yeah, the possibilities are endless. And, you know, I was just thinking about this and, you know, us doing the tech talk. So I'll answer this question, which I would have usually said to the end, and I'm the king of open-ended questions, so I apologize. But like, we're sitting here and it's amazing. You know, I do think back to when video walls were coming out, we were talking about that, you know, kind of conversion of the technologies, but there's so much more now. And so so somebody that just goes on Chavez's website and says, I'm watching this video and I see these cool video screens, and I know this is open-ended, but what do they need to look at now? I mean, we have so many different art forms. Like there's content creation, which is an art. There's lighting design, which is an art. There's dealing with the rendering stuff, which is an art. I mean, you know, what's out there that maybe someone that was just going to do typical lighting can now look forward to say, hey, I need to kind of put this in my portfolio a little bit to learn, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, I am a more video heavy person. I'm sitting in between two to lighting designers. I think that people are going to have to stop considering them two different disciplines. I think we have to start understanding that light is light, and the way that we can use it requires us all to expand our knowledge of, as I did with fixtures and understanding lighting consoles in the beginning, and
They can't
and
call
now-
you idiot anymore.
No, they cannot.
Yeah, we
do
can.
that. They can.
We
But
get chairs thrown at us, but we can.
but I do think that people have to start considering, and even with audio too, there's a real move with spatial audio, and to start to, first of all, learn computers just in general.
That
I think it's-
foundation,
yeah.
networking,
Computers, menu
graphics,
structure.
EDIDs.
Yeah, I think it's all incredibly valuable as all these disciplines start to bleed over. And just as, you guys are now making, better and better and finer pixel pitch walls, I think you're doing exactly what needs to happen, which is to say that we all need to kind of, see how these things are overlapping. And, LED is emittive light, and who should be paying attention to that,
Yeah.
lighting companies.
I'm just saying this. I've said this for like 8 years, but I really want to see a transparent LED wall. You guys can do it.
Just steal it from LG. They've got
Yeah.
those
Yeah, I know.
panels.
Yeah, I'm
They're
gonna.
only-
One of the things, one of the things that kind of made me think of was, I know both of us are kind of doing this on a larger scale, but there is actually a very, very low cost to entry in this field. It doesn't have to be LED wall at all. It doesn't need to be the OptiTrack system that we have. So this is just a Vive tracker that you can buy. I think it's $100, $200. And right now, we're actually using this one right now because there are disguise systems in the other room. But it tracks information. So it's going to track position data, and you can feed that data into the Unreal Engine. And so this is actually what's telling the camera where it is in space. So as you move the camera around, it's essentially attached to it. It's going to tell Unreal to some information on height, all position data, rotating. But again, these are really affordable, and you can use your TV at home. It doesn't even have to be anything special as far as your display goes. You can even use your iPhone. So it's really. I know we're getting this to a larger level, but people that want to try it, you can do this just to give it a shot and experiment.
And do it, because companies like ours need more people
Desperately.
that do this. Our
that's
team there's 4 of us. Corey's working, so he doesn't get to be on screen with us, but there's not a lot of people who do this, so finding more people that can slot in is difficult. And if there's more people trained up on camera tracking, it's so random that not many people know how to. They don't know it. So,
And I think one big thing to note, I think it's still active, but like Disguise gave away free licenses. And to be perfectly frank, we couldn't leave our apartment for 2 months. We were in New York City, like we worked from home, and we built entire visualizations of this inside of the software and started pitching it before we could even build it physically. And I think once you have a good understanding of the technology, I think a lot of these companies are, trying to give access and trainings online. And I think anybody who's interested in this stuff should really start checking them out and just trying to absorb as much information as possible.
and it can be a lot of fun. When we were stuck at home doing this, I built out, this is gonna be a little embarrassing, but I built out the entire lighting rig from the ending of the Goofy movie so that we could drop it into Unreal and visualize with it, because we had just gotten an MA3 and we were like, let's get a little weird. And it was the middle of quarantine.
That's
so that
your
happened.
everyday life.
Whatever. Anyway, so we did that, and we were able to visualize lighting in Unreal. It was still pretty basic back then, but I hear that they're working on it, and there's going to be
gotten
more
much
and
better.
more of that as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is so cutting edge, right? I mean, there's no tutorials out there. There's a lot of user groups right now, but there's no real tutorials on how to build an LED volume. Maybe it's just because not many people are really doing it. But I heard, I think Epic Games said on thing I was watching, there's only about 100 of these stages in the US or around the world or something. It's not a lot. So it takes and you guys said this at the very beginning, and I just want to say it again too. It takes a ton of knowledge and skill in very different mediums to be able to do this. You have, for me, I have John, who's like the tech wizard on how to make anything video work. I don't know how any of it works, but he does. And then you have Ian, who's this kind of creative genius. And then to come up in Unreal, you have to have an Unreal person that understands, because Unreal is a beast in itself.
Yeah.
And then the hardware solution is trying to come up with options that don't exist yet on how do we actually mount this the best way to the camera? Where is the best spot to put it? There's a lot of different people to make all of this happen. So I think that's actually probably why it's so fun doing it.
Yeah.
It's because it's bringing a lot of different skill types together.
And I bet they've seen it even from, Unreal side, and the rest of it are like, oh, this is a different market. Then, I mean, obviously it's been done for film and stuff for a while, but they look at that and say, hey, this is something now that can even expand forward. And, theater's been doing stuff with digital projection and things like that for a while, but in these fixed installation type places, this could really, change the game. House of worship, things like that, could be a lot different. So that's really, really fascinating. Very cool. Kudos to you guys for being the pioneers,
And you mentioned the House of Worship thing. All of them are now not all, but many of them are doing virtual, services. So imagine you drop yourself in an XR stage for this, and you can be, I don't know, floating in the clouds, or, you could drop yourself anywhere that you can have somebody create the content for. It's really endless. Where you could go with that.
And it's also interactions with more substance, like this is great. We get to sit here and we can see your faces and we can talk to you. But, for the people watching, I think, they're watching, a very basic layout, and yet on an XR stage or a volume or any of this type of technology, you can have interactions with people on screens, or, you can do things that I think are just going to be more impactful, especially in a time when we're all feeling completely disconnected from any, interaction. So,
and in a live render set, because all of this is live, you can use the tracking that Tim had mentioned, and you can have screens up, kind of Iron Man it, and you can swipe them away and make the screen go away. You can interact with these, you can bring panelists up out of the ground. You can bring guests in, you can bring AR elements if you're doing anything.
We've even green screened people into an XR stage to interact with somebody live on that stage. And although it's not as, it's a little limited because you're dealing with a 2D representation on a green screen, if you do it right, it's pretty amazing how, camera, the jib kind of flies over and settles in a position, and then you bring them in. It's pretty magical experience, and I think that it helps people engage for sure.
Or you can bring in missized versions of people where you have a miniature perch in the person's hand, which we've also done. It can just be goofy and fun as well.
Yeah.
So just kind of getting back onto the lighting side a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about the transitioning from green screen into video. So how has that changed how you've approached like lighting and green screen into lighting in this world?
I don't do a lot of green screen lighting, so I'm not gonna answer this one.
Right.
We've done a handful of green screen, and it's pretty basic. It's light the wall, light the subject, make sure they bounce. There's not much to it. It's pretty rinse and repeat. The thing about lighting on the LED that I found is it takes all of the skills that you've gathered, whether it's lighting for theater, lighting for dance, lighting for broadcast. It takes all of your lighting tricks, all your wheelhouse, and you have to pull a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and a little bit from this, and you're just mixing, and you're trying to find how you bring all of those items to make it work on LED.
And I think also, what we learned big time on this last shoot we did is that you have to change the toolkit depending on the shot you're taking. Doing a wide shot on XR with the set extensions, you have to be perfect. You cannot show a corner because you're going to see that lighting difference when it's trying to blend into the virtual. But guess what? The minute you take a close-up shot, you only have to worry about what's on camera. So you can start lighting from different angles.
Those are the good
You can-
shots.
You can bring you can bring lights on stands in, and you have more leeway. So it's also a very movable thing, right? It changes from shot to shot what your toolkit is, which can be a little terrifying.
I think one of my favorite parts of lighting when it comes to also having an Unreal scene is we'll be looking at a shot on camera and someone will say, "What is that spot right there? We don't like that light." And everyone will turn to Ben and be like, "Can you kill that light?" And he'll look over at me. He's like, "That's not my light. That's an Unreal light."
A lot of times we had reflections off of the, we get the matte LED floor because that's, as dark as it can go. And we still have lights that just reflect off of it from the LED surface. And as the lighting guy, you get blamed for it right away. They're like, "Get that light off there." I'm like,
It's literally your
I'd love
content
to,
reflecting
but,
off of a dark floor.
unless anybody's got a flat to put against the wall and block the wall.
That's a
I'm out
huge
of-
thing is considering the LED as a light source, not only lighting the subject, but lighting itself. So if you have a wall and then you have a floor and you have a bright white piece of content, be it a particle effect, a prop, anything, it's going to be a bright white soft light lighting your floor, and you're going to see the seam in your stage. So you have to kind of take in,
and they're going to blame the lighting guy.
exactly. So you have to take into account the LED as a light source, even when you're making the content and thinking about framing the shot.
And unfortunately, what this means is in something that's already terribly expensive, the answer a lot of times is make your stage bigger, make your floor deeper, make sure you have as much space to light without hitting these surfaces, which never makes a client happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's
So-
a really good point, though, is the lighting of the wall itself is a problem. It's a big problem.
It'll
So-
blow up the illusion.
Yeah, yeah. So you can't see it right now because our house lights are off. But if we turn on the room lights, even with the scene that's back there now, there's a light that's like right above the wall, and it lights down, and you'll see every angle change on the wall, and therefore your scene is completely blown. So your cover is blown, I guess.
And it gets real animated here sometimes because we'll get the scene to look good, and then I'll start turning on lights, and it's like I see the seams, and I'm like, I need some time. I'm trying to figure this out because, like Matt said, every time it's different. You may be in the exact same position with everything, but the camera moves a little bit, and it just exposes another issue, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, let's rework this.
An order of operation has been such an important part of how we discuss. It's like because not only does it blow the scene's cover, but it also affects the color of what the camera sees on the wall. So there's a lot of times where I'll get everything colored correctly, and then Ben will finish his lighting look. It'll get approved, but then I have to go back and recolor because now, LED column F
They blame the lighting guy.
needs to be shaded a little bit, so because it's getting this reflection that's shifting the color on camera a little blue, or and so we're always chasing our tails in a way, and it only works if we allow each other to do our work before we move to the next step.
And then also, like, if I finish lighting a scene and it messes something up for Matt, not for him to just go and start fixing it, but also him be like, hey, if you remove that little piece there, it means we have to, communicate on time, or, in a stressful environment, and keep that, keep not blaming each other, but figuring out how to work together and make it work.
And sometimes
So-
it means keyframing, color correction, so that I can fade new color corrections in during live animations, which
Is fun.
It's very tedious.
So do you have to run are your light levels like really bright, really dim, or does it just kind of depend on the setting and the scene?
If we're lucky, we can run it bright, but most times I'm using 8 different fixtures at different angles so that I don't at a very low level, so that I don't put too much light in one area on the LED wall. And
Yeah,
believe it or not, we found that as great as they are about panel lights, they're not always they're great for film. They're not always the best solution for the XR on the XR stage because they just illuminate too much a lot of times.
Yeah, we had to add egg crates to all of our panel lights to just control it, to keep it off the wall. And never mind, I forgot what I was going to say. But it was
Egg
so
crates,
deep.
man. I get you.
I get it. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a great, adding on to that, what are the, without being too big, what are the fixtures that make the most sense when you're looking at it? And I don't mean by manufacturer necessarily things like that. Like, it sounds like you have to have control, but when you're putting it together, like, what's the ideal type of situation lighting wise? I've got to have I have to have this, and then I can start, putting these other things into place.
It completely depends on what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if we're doing a concert look, I want actual, concert lighting. If we're doing a film and I need, it completely changes. So sometimes panel lights, soft boxes, we have a 20 by that we put over the stage. We need super soft. There's follow spots. It's always different. That's why there's so many lights, because the application is different.
I found that I need to have a rig that's versatile. That's always my number one rule with everything we do. But we do have a combination of panels as well as a whole lot of movers with frames, shutters. That's the most important thing. And then if you're lucky enough to also have gobos in there and rotating and animation wheels, that's always helpful, because you have a spotlight. You can't make it a soft light, even no matter how much diffusion you run in and all that sort of stuff. So if you start bringing in, and it's going to piss off all the film lighting guys, but if you bring in a gobo and soften that, it just softens it a little more. And then, if you just bring in a little bit more, put more stuff in the way of the beam, it just softens it just a little more to where you can hopefully get to a good spot.
And I think that this also goes even further back. Like, the last thing you want to do is be a lighting person and show up, because they've already screwed you, to be perfectly honest. What I mean by that is this conversation has to happen before content is even created, right? Because if they need certain lighting looks, they need to lean into that into the content too. So for instance, when we talk about concerts, we absolutely need to make sure that if we have an LED floor, it's an LED floor, meaning we don't want anything to render, because from a camera's perspective, sometimes the floor will be rendering what is supposed to be a wall, right? And when you throw a spotlight and that light pools onto what's supposed to be a wall, it breaks the illusion. But if your floor is truly a floor, then you can hit it with a spotlight and it's okay to see that shadow and it's okay to see the outside of it. So if you're not thinking about these things before you even build the content, I think that you're putting the lighting person at a big disadvantage.
Or your ground package. If your ground package, because the parallax is going, if your ground package is suddenly where it's supposed to be, what was supposed to be a wall, and you're like, what the heck is going on? And, it looks like a Picasso, I guess.
And I think that kind of speaks to the more theatrical side of it, is if you're working with an Unreal scene, you really need a rig that has movers so that you can get different angles, because you don't know what the scene is going to look like. So for example, if you're in like a bar scene and there's a TV on the wall, you need to be able to recreate that light on the person.
Go to the bar scene.
I can't go to the bar scene.
Over here.
So there's a number of different elements that you have to take into account with the Unreal scene. So it's almost like there's two lighting designers, the Unreal and the real lighting designer. And if there's no communication, like Matt said, then there's going to be a lot of catch up on site.
Yeah. And I also think to the extent that it's amazing how quickly we can rotate, move, and manipulate virtual worlds, that can either be a benefit or it cannot be. If we use it to adjust the virtual world to help a lighting designer get the looks that they want, for instance, moving it back so walls are off of floors, or it can be something that can doom them by trying to get certain looks, and having a tool to zhuzh everything around however you want could make it very difficult for a designer to then step in without a million movers in every little location to try to compensate for those small movements.
But you can also plan ahead for some of these things. Like if there's certain fixtures in the Unreal scene that you want to be able to give the lighting designer direct control over, you can build that functionality, especially in Unreal Engine 4.2.5. They actually integrated the DMX plugin, which was on the market, but never actually fully integrated it. And in 4.2.6, it's going to be much better. And essentially what you can do is bring in GDTF fixtures and have the exact same profile on the fixture in Unreal Engine as it is in real life. So if you have the same fixture in the air and the same fixture in Unreal Engine, the lighting designer can control it from a console without ever having any knowledge of controlling a virtual fixture. It's the exact same profile. You can clone your presets. You could walk in and hit play on a time-coded show with virtual lights, having never touched them before.
What he's
Right,
saying
which
is that everybody should get their lights on GDTF.
Yes.
Please.
That's right.
Accurate GDTF profiles are going to be awesome, especially for the music world. If you want to do an XR concert, one of the things that's really cool about XR is, and the crewing of it, is trying to get people into a new technology, but comfortable in the ways that they used to work a little bit. And if you have a lighting designer coming in to shoot like a concert in XR with a virtual rig, if he can just come in and plug in his console and hit play and have the virtual lights and real lights act exactly how he saw it in his visualizer, then that's totally possible if you have accurate GDTF models.
Yeah, we have one of our lighting designers who just built a full stage in Unreal, and it's for previs, it's going to become amazing. I
And it
mean,
looks
let
great, too.
alone it does looks fantastic. But what's cool is like in this room, because we have a lot of lighting fixtures in here, and they happen to be all Chauvet, just so you know. But the here you go, here's your drop.
It's like,
But
Ding, ding, ding.
that's right. But being able to extend now the stage as deep as we want to go and make any environment continue, it's pretty cool. You actually run into a problem though, because one thing you can't do, at least for now, unless there's a transparent LED wall, if you have lights above the stage and we have haze in the room, you see the beams going through the air. If there's lights on the virtual stage in Unreal, you see the lights going through the air. But what happens when that light shines forward from Unreal and you see it through the air, but it's not, remember, and it's coming out as a soft light now to the video wall, not a hard light, you lose the beam in midair. So we can just not point our lights forward in Unreal, but you know, these are the things that come up, just weird things that you wouldn't really experience any other way. So, but it lets us build these endless stages, which is pretty crazy.
it's awesome.
Or maybe you go back to the blow through screen so you can actually put a fixture behind and just pop it through.
Well, I think
Well, I
about
guess
putting
it
the X6, because the X6 that we have is blow through. We're actually going to put it in front of this video wall so this one's there.
Ooh.
There's another one in front of it, and then like put strikes behind it, shining through it.
That's
a brilliant idea. Just came up.
I've done that in the studio before, where we set up when we were doing the like way back when we were doing the MVP 12 and 18s, and being able to push through light through that. It's pretty sick. Yeah, it just seems like with all this, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that you guys have learned along the way. But I think that for the rest of the lighting community, video community, computer community, obviously I can see there's a lot of space where we all need to kind of coalescing around some ideas, and because I don't think that there's been a book written on this. So it's kind of cool that you guys are out there kind of writing the book as you go on how to do all this. So if I'm just a dude at home, where can I go to kind of get some knowledge about what you guys are doing, and how do I, you said it's a good idea to start picking this up. How do I go about starting that?
Facebook, there's a group that Matt Workman started called, Unreal
Virtual production, Unreal Engine virtual production.
Yeah, so that started at the beginning of this year. Matt has been around for a while. He's out of Boston, and he's been really kind of well known in the space. And he kind of made a lot of what I think this is today, getting people on board. And that started, in like February. There was only like 500 members, and now there's like 30,000 or something. So and everyone there just loves to share. That's where we started. That's where I think a lot of people started there. It got people fired up and got everyone thinking about new things that they could do. And a lot of them are not in this space. They're not in LED stages. They're just using Unreal and using XR in some way.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
And then for you guys over at Bomb, what do you guys think as far as
Boom.
like how where to kind of boom.
It's our
Sorry.
own fault. Yeah, it's the name
spelled it.
started as a joke anyways.
I know.
I know.
It was.
What do I think? I think that there are a lot of places to find information on this. And frankly, even with our freelancers, the people that we lean on, in the before times, there are a couple people that are pushing really hard and to get up to speed with us. And that is even difficult with people we know because they're here shadowing while we're saying, I have no idea why that just happened. So give me a couple days to figure that out before I can even explain what's going on. I think it's hard but there are good resources. There's, like I said, Disguise has a ton of online training. It's a great place to start. They're giving away free licenses. It's like $50 to get the key, the authorization key, and then they're giving away free licenses. Unreal has a ton of tutorials, a ton. I mean,
Epic Games
yeah.
started a fellowship program back. I think they first tested it in March with a small group of people, and it was basically a month of intensive classes, something like 54 hours of content. And they've actually, I think at the beginning of October, they put online on the Unreal Academy learning portal nearly all of those classes and lectures. It's something like, I think they put up 39 hours or something of content, including 2 really long lectures that it's called the Virtual Production Primer. It goes from start to finish, different types of virtual production, different types of systems. I know Matt Workman did one of those lectures, and it's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
But if you want to, go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead.
If you want to stay in the lighting space, if that's really, if that's what your passion is and you really want to stay there, just become extremely flexible. Start learning the principles of film lighting, start learning the principles of dance lighting. If you learn the principles of, and really broad strokes to start with, and then start figuring out, the little minutia here and there. But, widen, outside of say concert lighting or event lighting, widen what you do so that when you get on one of these stages, you have the tool bag ready to do the work.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And be patient. Very, very patient.
Real quick, I know we got to wrap up soon. Did you guys want to see kind of behind the scenes a little bit of what it looks like some of the gear and stuff? I know every tour we give, people like to see kind of what it's like, how does it all work? And
yeah, absolutely.
Kind of what goes behind the scenes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, we'll take you for a little spin. We'll do it quick, but all right. So this, you can see the wall here is curved. I actually can't see what you guys see anymore. So, but this wall it's about 60 feet. And Joel, if you look up, you can see we just have a regular lighting grid here. There's nothing special about what we have above us, except they're Chauvet fixtures. That's for you guys. This is actually a Chauvet wall. This is the F2 wall, so it's 2 millimeter. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is how close can you get to it? And it's not, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on your lens. It depends on where you're focused. So in our case, sometimes we're within 2 feet of it. A lot of people say you can't be within 10 feet. It's always different. So,
yep.
And then over here, I'm going to show you the trackers that we're using. So this is a system called OptiTrack, and this is what the Mandalorian is using. This is also what BlackTrax uses, and it's also how we do motion capture. So we're just testing stuff in here right now. But that TV up on the wall, this camera is facing it. So the tests that we're doing are going to let us, we're going to try doing to do our set extensions in this room. So essentially the TV will have Unreal on it, and then we're going to extend the rest of the entire room in the same scene. Awesome. So what that means though, is if you put your hand in front of the TV, you'll see your hand, but as soon as you move your hand out of the TV, you're gone. So picture that in a giant LED wall. I can walk anywhere in the LED volume, but as soon as I walk, the camera sees me leave the LED stage, I would disappear because the set extension is taking over. And then over here where John is, I don't know if you can make this far, Joel. these are our disguise servers. John is the tech guru I was talking about, who's a relative genius. And there's 2 VX2 servers right here and 2 RX, XR? Oh no, there's 2 servers down there. And the 2 bottom ones will run Unreal. One is gonna basically render the information that the camera sees only. The other one's gonna render everything around there. So we'll go back into the studio. I'll just show you real quick. And then if we add a third one, I know, Boom, you guys have 4 of those, right?
We do now.
Sometimes we have 6.
Yeah.
Depending on the day.
So those are really kind of doing a lot of the processing power. They don't have the thrust them up right now, but essentially the camera's going to see one thing, and then everything else that's around it. You do see it actually. You can see it moving you're seeing what the camera sees only, and then that will be rendered by one machine. The outside is by another. That way, there's less information that has to be put on both servers. They feed that information then into the VX2 media server, which we can layer more video into at the same time. It also lets us bring in multiple cameras. So let's say we're doing a shoot. You can see what the camera was just seeing, but if you have to cut cameras, if you have 2 cameras, how does the video wall cut fast enough in real time as you cut cameras? And that's what Disguise lets us do. It lets us add multiple cameras and sync up instantaneously the switch between cameras so you can have multi-cameras going.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Wow. That is.
Yeah, I think that just to add on to this just really quickly, I think it's really important to note, the Mandalorian used a workflow that leaned on something called end display, and it's an amazing workflow, and the person who created it did an incredible job. But where we're getting to now, and the reason Disguise has become so important, is because it's sort of becoming the management hub for data and screens. And what it's ultimately doing is doing everything that it does well, which includes receiving tracking data or any kind of automation data, and then it's feeding screens in sync, allowing these new RX boxes to basically, all it's really doing is running Unreal with a custom blueprint or basically a plugin for Unreal, to be more simple about it. And that just allows Disguise to say, hey, here's the tracking information, make your camera do this, and then saying, this is when I need frames from you, and I'll handle the rest. And I think what that's going to do is it's going to allow more and more people, although it is an expensive workflow, more people to be able to jump in and figure this out, because there's some more automated processes and a little more of a user experience operationally for a lot of people who are used to that and working in media servers. And I think that's going to definitely change the playing field and allow more people an introduction to this without, like Tim's gone through and we've gone through 7 months of, basically learning something from scratch. So,
yeah.
Which is great.
You don't have to write in display config files.
And you only get that joke once you've done it, because
Exactly.
And then it's not funny anymore. Yeah.
Or it's just not. It has to do with lights.
Awesome. Well, you guys,
All right,
truly
guys.
are pioneers. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, because I know that both your companies are extremely busy getting things going on. So
And eventually someone will pay us for that. Sorry.
But everybody on the content receiving side really does appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing over the past few months. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come out and talk to us. I do appreciate it. So with Boom Creative as well as Events United, thank you very much for coming out, and we'll see you next time on Tech Talk.
Thanks for having us.
Be
thanks,
well.
guys.